Here is my audience. I'm sure that everyone here has heard of SNAP, WIC, SSI, and etc. at least once before. If you have, you may know that these programs exist to battle the very real crisis of poverty. Not only does this issue of poverty tie closely with my major in social work, but I also come from an impoverished community myself. While poverty programs may help families find some sort of stability, they are also keeping these families in poverty and need to be reformed. My name is Jay Vidic, and I will now explain to you all why reformation is necessary to solve the issues like eligibility and lack of outreach, causing poverty programs to contribute to poverty instead of alleviating it. As previously mentioned, poverty programs are failing to alleviate poverty. Unfortunately, these programs are contradicting their own agenda by the way eligibility and outreach is currently set up. As stated by Regard Joseph's Poverty, Welfare, and Self-Sufficiency Implications of the Social Work Profession, people who are street homeless, for instance, are excluded from participation in most safety net programs due to the absence of a personal address. So while these programs do help some, not everyone who needs these programs get help because they do not fit the requirements. Those who suffer from severe and persistent mental illness, or SPMI, like bipolar disorder, major depression, schizophrenia, etc., also struggle when it comes to getting benefits. These chronic illnesses do not fit the medical model, so these individuals are at high risk for unemployment. But even so, they're often left behind by poverty programs. A persistent finding in epidemiological literature is the inverse relationship between social economic status and a prevalence of mental disorders, specifically schizophrenia. In effect, the United States keeps people with SPMI sick and unproductive. According to Ashley Gaffiardo's Homeless and Hopelessness, how the United States has failed those with severe and persistent mental illness. Eligibility is also based on an outdated system called the Federal Poverty Line. This system was created in the 1950s but hasn't changed since then. Joseph explains that it may be true that the households spent 1/3 of their incomes on food in the 1950s, but this is not the case today. Housing costs, both mortgage loans and rent, have increased and now consume more than 1/3 of household incomes, often approaching or exceeding 50%. Now that we've gone over how these issues are affecting the effectiveness of poverty programs, you may be asking, why is this relevant to you? The problem is relevant because it's a big issue happening in our own backyard. According to Joseph, with a rate of 12.3%, poverty levels reached close to 40 million Americans in 2017. Children in America are also at risk for facing poverty. The Case for Family Benefits by Jonathan Bradshaw states that in almost all countries, children have a higher risk of poverty than the population as a whole, and in many countries, including the United States, they have a higher risk of poverty than pensioners. Since I've discussed how relevant this problem is, I'll now explain what would happen if this problem persists. If this problem isn't resolved, it will continue to heavily impact those affected by poverty. In concurrent participation in federally funded welfare programs and empowerment towards economic self-sufficiency by Regard Joseph and others, studies shown that those who did not have or were formerly a part of these programs struggled to stay in the workforce. Findings suggested that workers with TANF backgrounds struggled to maintain employment due to frequent job absences. Among other personal issues, lack of transportation prevented them from being constantly on the worksite. Consequently, these workers failed to garner the experience necessary for upward mobility. Bradshaw talks a little about how this continued poor outreach can affect those in poverty, stating, "If only a small minority are eligible, then few realize they are eligible." Thankfully, there is a solution to help aid in the resolving these issues in poverty programs. The solution to helping poverty programs get on track with their intended agenda through revision of their current policies. Poverty programs need to revise eligibility requirements and provide full benefits to all participants. Joseph proposes welfare benefits should not be proportional to income during the transitional period. Instead, welfare recipients should be guaranteed full benefits while moving gradually into a secure, good-paying job. Policies also need to revisit their current policies to make sure that current policies do not exclude or stigmatize the poor. William Asher's Coping with the Ambiguities of Poverty Alleviation Programs and Policies, a policy science approach, explains this well. Poverty alleviation programs designers should consider application processes that would reduce exclusion errors if the processes result in more tolerance for inclusion errors. While this is advisable, depends on whether appraisal indicates that formerly ineligible enrolled families are nearly poor enough to have qualified, and whether ordeals designed to exclude the ineligible are highly stigmatized for those who are eligible. If this situation is applied, those in poverty would be able to get back on their feet. Poverty programs would be able to achieve their goal of alleviating poverty, which would give participants a shot at getting into and staying into the workforce, and in turn will get back to the economy. Joseph explains that, first, all able-bodied individuals should continue to cultivate fortitude for hard work and/or education. Second, policymakers should ensure better wages and working conditions, including fringe benefits for low-skilled workers. Finally, the government should continue to provide full welfare assistance to workers and students who transition towards economic self-sufficiency. I hope that you all got to learn more today about the issues in poverty programs and how reformation can be beneficial for these programs to succeed in their goal of alleviating poverty. We live in one of the wealthiest countries on the planet, yet we have those who still have to choose whether they should pay rent or buy groceries. Everyone should be able to have a home and a hot meal to come home to. Thank you.